You are overthinking watercolor. Today I'm sharing tips for simpler painting and better results. What's up, friends? Welcome back to the channel where making art is fun, not scary. My name is Shayda Campbell. Today we're going to paint some watercolor roses, and I'm going to show you how I used to overcomplicate things, overthink them. Now, my supplies are quite simple: watercolor palette, cold pressed paper. We will talk more about them later on, so stick around. Let's start painting, and let me show you what not to do, what I used to do. So I used to always start in pencil for fear of messing up. And if I was going to paint a rose, say, I would draw every petal. I would make things too symmetrical, doing pairs of leaves that are exactly the same size, exactly the same shape. And then when I was done with my illustration, I would mix up some paints using colors like red and white if I wanted pink. So no mixing in, I love to add a little brown to muddy up my colors. And then I would paint in the lines, like really staying within the drawing that I had done. Even worse, I would often do an outline and then go and fill in that area. And that's as opposed to doing nice, smooth brush strokes, letting the brushwork, that means letting the way you paint, actually be part of creating the shape. Think of it like this: fluid, organic brush strokes create natural, organic-looking shapes on the paper, like leaves and petals. And another problem created by that coloring book approach, where you're doing an outline and then coloring in, is that you'll sometimes get really hard color outlines, and it'll leave you wondering, why does the outside edge of my leaf look so dark and the middle so light? Another reason that this happens to me, to you, to all of us, is because we either come back in and add a lighter, more watery paint, or we simply put way too much water in the paint. The paper cannot absorb that much liquid, and it creates those harsh borders when it dries. This rose is not turning out the way I want. Even though I'm being really careful and painting in all the lines, everything looks messy and blurry, and it's because I'm not allowing things to dry before adding more color, more pigment. So let's scrap this one. I'm gonna let her dry completely. And now let's have a chat about it. I'm seeing a lot of those harsh perimeters, too much paint, doing the outlines first. I'm also seeing a lot of blurring and just messy bits, even though I was trying to paint one petal at a time. The problem there is I wasn't using fluid brush strokes. And to top it all off, I didn't wait before adding more paint, more detail, leading to that blurriness and messiness. I was overthinking, I did way too much, and the result is just not it. So let me show you what is it. And we'll start by talking about supplies in more detail. I am using my Shayda Campbell set of watercolor pans, 24 little cakes with all my favorite colors, good greens, good magentas. I've got a couple glasses of clean water, one for cool colors, one for warm colors, paper towel for blotting my brush. I'm working on 140-pound cold pressed paper, and I have two brushes, a number 8 filbert and a number 6 round. Having two different brushes is very important. We'll talk about that later on, so stick around. Now, the first thing we're going to do for this one is draw a vase, and I just do like a very messy vase in pencil, and we are going to leave the top of that vase completely blank. Now come on over to the palette, and we are mixing Rose Madder Hue. It is the most wonderful dark magenta with a little bit of white, but also a little bit of red brown and a little bit of raw sienna. So the brown kind of dulls your pink, the raw sienna will make it a little more peachy. I love a muddy hue. I don't want my colors too bright. And then we're gonna come on over here to the paper, and using the filbert, I kind of just make these messy petal shapes, one brush stroke at a time, and I allow a flower to emerge really naturally. I kind of just play around and try to make a messy shape. You can move the brush on an angle, you can make flowers different sizes, different overall shapes, and just have fun with it. Try to create the flower using really organic, fluid motions of the brush. And I like to mix in a little extra white as I work to ensure that all the flowers are like a slightly different color. Okay, let's talk beautiful leaves. I am using the wide part of the filbert brush. I run it across the paper, adding a little bit of pressure. Whatever shape I get, I leave it. It's a leaf if you say it's a leaf. Turn your brush on its angle, use that flat bit, and make a natural stem. Let's do this again together. Wide part of the filbert holds lots of paint, 1 or 2 brush strokes, and there's your leaf shape. It's very perfectly imperfect. Not all of them have to come to a perfect fine point. And then you come back in on that angle. You use that part of the brush to do a very thin little stem and connect those leaves. I'm also using a green, I'm using sap green with olive green, and then I've put like a hint of Payne's gray in there, which is a blue gray, and I love the color that that gives me. I'm doing leaves of all different shapes and sizes. If you do kind of a thin, narrow leaf, it will look as though the leaf is on more of an angle. Doing some very dark leaves, so lots of Payne's gray mixed in or lots of brown mixed in or whatever, can give you a sense of depth, can give your piece a bit more depth, and definitely paint some leaves and flowers onto the vase area to give your bouquet this sense of being very full and cascading over the vase. Now for the first time, we are going to switch our paintbrush. So wash that filbert and set it aside and grab your round brush. Mine is a number 6, and I'm going to mix up a blue, but you can use any color for the vase. I'm using ultramarine and Payne's gray, and all I'm going to do is outline the vase on the left-hand side and then use that line as a guide and keep repeating it till I get to the center, and then go the other way on the right-hand side, repeating the curve of the outer right edge to give your vase a funky shape, a bit of roundness, and a nice pattern all at the same time. I put a little base on mine, and then I might just thicken up a few edges wherever I feel like it needs it. And finally, I will add the top of the vase kind of in behind those flowers and leaves. Now we need to let that dry completely. No messy edges and blurred lines here. And then I am taking this beautiful mix of that rose madder hue and a bit of red brown. I've got this great dark color. I'm just gonna kind of paint a messy starburst or flower right at the center of one of these roses. Then I'm gonna go around and do these messy little curly, bumpy lines, and I'm hinting at the idea of there being layers and layers of petals. It's messy, it's free, and I love the way it looks. You can also just do the starburst and leave it at that. I think that looks so graphic and punchy and cool. You can do the starburst in the center and a few small petal lines. It's totally up to you. All I'll say is knowing when to do less is a huge part of the artistic process. I tend to do too much, and it's something that I work on every time I paint. I also recommend going outside of the pink area. So when you're painting these little messy petals, make sure that some of them are on the white part of the page. Not everything has to match up perfectly. Next up, I'll mix a little bit of Payne's gray into my olive green and sap green mix to give me a lovely dark green color. And I'm going to use the tip of the number 6 round brush to do a little wet on dry technique. Wet on dry is just what it sounds like. You're using wet pigment on top of the paint that has already dried. In this way, you can be really precise, just like we did with the flower petals. And we can do little lines on the center of the leaves to give them a little motion. We can darken things up if we want. We could do outlines on the leaves like we did with the petal shapes. So totally up to you. I just did some center lines, and then I am sort of done. And I love that doing less helped me to create something that looks voluminous and exciting and free and pretty. You can see that there was effort put into this, but it looks fun, I think. It looks alive. And I want to top that off and do a little bit extra. And so I mixed a really pretty lavender color. So this is ultramarine and rose madder hue with some white and lots of water. And I am just doing a border, and I'm using the wide edge of that filbert to paint across each section. And then I'm just doing semicircles in the corners. So it gives you this very playful border. Again, you've done less and it looks so cute. They are not all symmetrical, not by a long shot, so don't worry if yours isn't. And then I took the dark red that I used on the flowers, and I used the other brush, the number 6 round, that has that nice delicate point, and I just did a little thin detail on that border, and I did my initials because this is so pretty. And I love how playful this is. By doing less and not overthinking things, we created something so lovely. And so if you are overcomplicating your watercolor, try this approach where it's about the brushwork, where you're waiting, you're giving yourself a minute. I used to think that painting free and loose meant painting really fast. That is not the case, it turns out. So I hope that this covered some of those mistakes. You want those, sometimes we want that wet into wet blurry look, but for me, I wanted the really crisp outlines on the petals and the leaves, and that's what I got in the second one simply by waiting.